Okay, Nick, thanks a lot for being here. It's a great pleasure. I'm really honored to have the Drummers Resource podcast, mine here at Drumlosophy.
Of course, thanks for asking me. I appreciate. I love
Yeah,
chopping it up with fellow drummers, especially my Italian buddy. So it's my pleasure, man. I really appreciate you asking me.
first of all, thank you on behalf of the drumming community because you started this project called Drummers Resource Podcast. I'm going to put the link below in the description. And it's a great project. And just tell a little bit about how you came up with the idea of creating this podcast and how it developed during these years.
I'll give you the short version because there's a longer story that goes along with it that I don't necessarily know if we need to get into the whole story. But long story short, I had met a woman that lived 2.5 hours away from me, and I was driving back and forth a lot. And I started listening to podcasts. That woman is now my wife, so that worked out really well. But but at the same, so I lived outside of Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, and then she lived outside of New York City. And what I would always want to go to New York City and take lessons from drummers, but at that point in my career, like I had already been touring and I had already put out a bunch of records and everything. So I felt like playing wise, not that I didn't need improvement, but I didn't necessarily need lessons for someone to show me how to play. But what I really needed was knowledge and their mindset and their approach to things and sort of like strategies more than this is play this in parallel or something like that, like we talked about off air. So I said, well, I can't just expect people to just sit down and talk to me for an hour. So I said, well, why don't I just pay them for their time? So I'll say, look, I want to hire you for a lesson, whatever your rate is, if it's $100 or $200 an hour or whatever it is. But instead, I just want to hang out and talk to you and learn from you. Let's go get coffee. And for an hour and a half, you can pretend to be my friend and I'll give you $150 and we'll have coffee. But what I started to realize was that these conversations that I was having, that other people would probably want to hear these conversations and would probably really benefit from the knowledge as well. And at the time I was in a transition. I grew up in a family restaurant, an Italian restaurant, and I was getting out of that and really going heavy into music. So I was sort of like looking for new ideas, and I was listening to podcasts all the time. And I kind of had this aha moment and put these two things together and said, okay, I can. And there weren't any drumming podcasts at the time. Like now it seems obvious, but at the time there weren't any. So I said, okay, maybe I can just start interviewing the greatest drummers in the world and putting it out as a podcast. And then as it started to grow, before I don't want to say it was hard to get people on the podcast, but they didn't really know what it was or what it was about or anything like that. But then once it started to gain a little momentum, then people, when I would reach out to them, would say, "Oh, I've heard of your podcast," and it began to get a little easier to get guests, and then became sort of like this prestigious thing to come on the podcast. But that's the long and short of it. Is essentially, I wanted to have conversations with all of these people, and I figured other people would want to as well.
I know that you reached the 600 episodes, so it's a great conquer. How do you feel about that? Do you feel still pumped to go on?
I do. It's so interesting that of course, like with anything, there's part of it that becomes a job. There's some days, admittedly, like I'll have to do an interview. And it's like, man, I've done 600 of these, right? But as soon as the microphone turns on and I start having a conversation, I'm like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And then I get done with the conversation and I'm always super excited. I'm always energized. I'm always inspired to go practice or to listen to new music or explore different things that I've been maybe putting off or something like that. But not only that, once the interview was over, I have a new friend, and I have like this, and I have this contact now. And I posted something about this on Instagram the other day, that it's amazing that, we've done, 600 interviews, millions and millions of downloads, hundreds of thousands of people listen to it every month. But the biggest thing that I get out of it is I have all these relationships that I never would have had I not started the podcast. And I have like legitimate good friends that are really good friends of mine. And the only reason that I know them was they were on the podcast, and then we developed a relationship.
It's all about networking, and so it goes pretty well,
Yeah. Yeah. And even when you say networking, I'm actually less of a fan of the word networking. And I like the term building relationships, because that's what you're really doing. There's a lot of people who go around and like hand out business cards and, hey, call me. And I don't think that's really a genuine thing. But I think building relationships is important.
It's almost like you offer value to other people. So it's more an exchange, right?
Exactly. And that's an interesting point that we should talk about too. When I started the podcast, I never expected someone to just sit and have coffee with me for free when I was going and taking these lessons. So if you want to spend time with someone, offer to pay their rate. They don't even know you. And a lot of people are like, hey, can I pick your brain? And it's like, yeah, but my time is valuable. Not me, anyone. My time, your time, everyone's time is valuable. So if you want some time for someone and you want to like go grab coffee with them to pick their brain, that's a thing all the time, right? Can we grab coffee? And I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee. And it's like, I don't need you to buy me a cup of coffee. I can afford a cup of coffee, but like pay me for my time. And I'm not even saying me, pay anyone for their time. And I think that's a way of leading with value and showing respect and saying, look, I understand that the things that you're going to tell me are important, but also that your time is extremely valuable. And I want to make sure that you're compensated for your time. So whatever you charge for a lesson, that's what I'll pay you, to sit and chat with me for an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I find really interesting is that you were seeking for ideas and concepts, and not just exercises or ways of interpreting syncopation or whatever. You were, looking for a greater and higher concept that, almost surrounds the drum itself. Because, at the start of your podcast, you say something like inspiration for drumming and beyond. Right. So that term beyond, quote unquote, beyond, it's about, having the ideas that inspire you to create music. And that's a different story from playing the paradiddle or stop. What do you think about that?
There's a couple things. One, and that's absolutely right. And I think that it's about knowing yourself. Like I've never been the best practicer in the world. I taught drums for a couple years. I wasn't very good at it. And I didn't enjoy it, but I think that I didn't enjoy it because I wasn't good at it. And the way that I learn is I talk to people. And I've always been that way. So I'm like a sponge, and I need to soak up knowledge. So I figured me going out and like doing a video series about how to play paradiddles or how, teaching lessons or something like that. There were already a lot of people who were doing that, one, that I didn't think that I could compete with because I thought that they were a lot better than me. Two, it wasn't something that I was interested in. Not that I'm not interested in learning how to get better on the drums, but I think that that's covered. It's been covered a lot. And three, I didn't think that I could do that the best, right? And I was like, if I start this podcast, there's a chance that I could have the #1 drumming podcast in the world, right? Like I could be the best at this thing and be like the industry leader. Not that I'm saying I've achieved that, but I was like, I at least have the potential to do that. So those were some of the things. And the flip side of it, about you were asking why I really wanted to talk about the mental aspects of things and the psychology and the strategies and stuff like that, instead of like, here's how you play this thing. I'm really attracted to all of that stuff, like, mindset and personal development and all those things. And I always thought, how could we teach all these lessons, but like wrap it in something and like disguise it as something else, right? Like how can you get kids to eat their vegetables, but like wrap it in something that tastes good? So I thought we could have all of these mindset, personal development, life lessons. And the thing that we all have in common is that we're all drummers. So that's the thing that we'll wrap it in, right? So like if it comes from a drummer, or if you're hearing it from someone who speaks the same language, meaning like we all speak drum, right?
Yeah.
So So hearing it from people who you can relate to, who understand what you're going through, who are trying to do the same things that you do, I figured that would be a great way to be able to do it. So I was like, it's sort of like a drumming / personal development podcast. And admittedly, in the beginning, when I started it, people were like, I don't know if this thing is going to work. And even now, people were like, how did you get this thing to work? Because you don't really talk about drumming. You know, like you talk about drums and you talk about music and stuff like that, but like you talk about a lot of things like failure and getting better at things, and how can you take these life lessons and apply them to your relationship or your job if you don't play drums full time and all that. And that's what I always wanted to be, because at the end of the day, we're drummers, but like we're not just drummers. We're moms and dads and bankers and accountants and fathers and brothers and sisters and all that kind of stuff. So I think that we got to keep that in mind too, that life isn't just all about drums all the time.
Would you like to dig into a little bit more about the mental aspect? Because at the end of the day, when you play, when you perform, you just have to have your mindset together, right?
I think it's the most important thing. Like you said, I think that most of the time when people fail, it's not because of lack of ability or lack of work ethic or anything like that. I think it's your mindset. And the hard part is that the hard part and the easy part, or the good part and the bad part, is that your brain believes anything that you tell it, whether it's good or bad. So if you sit around and talk about how bad you are and you'll never be able to achieve this thing, and you know everyone else is better than you and all that kind of stuff, you'll start to believe it, and whether it's true or not. But the flip side of it is if you talk to yourself in a better way. Like my wife and I talk about this all the time. We're way harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. So like if you look in the mirror and you're like, you're a loser, or you play like shit, or you know, you're never going to be able to make it and stuff. And it's like, would you say that to like your girlfriend or your mom or your dad? Like you would never say that to someone you love, right? So why would you say that? Why do you say those things to yourself? And we're way hard. So I think without getting like too touchy-feely, like I think that we need to be kinder to ourselves in this journey, and realize that everyone that we look up to struggled with a lot of things, and everyone sucked at a lot of things for a long time. Like I think people think that, you know, we look at like Steve Gadd or Benny Greb or something like that, like they just came out of the womb and they were just this amazing drummer. Like even Benny talks about it. Like he was a slow learner, you know, didn't progress as fast as everyone else, and had to develop certain practice techniques and all that kind of stuff to get better. So what you tell yourself is important, and the way that you think about things is important. And I think that if you can master that, then you really have control of your destiny. Sure, you have to work hard, and there's a little bit of luck involved with some things. But if you're sitting there every day telling yourself that you can't do it, and you're never going to make it, and you're not good enough, and you suck, and everyone else is better than you, and like, man, here, like I would even argue, like, take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle, right? And write all these negative things about yourself, right? All these horrible things about, oh, you suck, you're a bad drummer, blah, 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 right? Once you start making that list, you'll start to feel like crap. It'll start to happen. And then on the other side, write all these good things about yourself, right? And once you start writing all those good things about yourself, you will literally start to feel better. And that is, like, just doing that is a great experiment to show how powerful your mind is. So I don't think that just feeling good is enough, but I think that that your mindset and having a positive view of yourself is super, super important.
Having done so many interviews with the greatest drummers in the world, what do you think are the top 3, 5, or whatever number you'd like to pick up lessons that you gain from them?
Well, I came prepared. I have all the. So a little while ago, I remember posting something about the 10 life lessons I learned from interviewing at at this point, I said 500 of the greatest drummers in the world. So now it's up to 600. But I think that all of these 10 things, and there are no particular order, but these 10 things are things that I've learned after doing all of these. So do you mind if I'll just run through them?
Absolutely.
Okay. So number one is everything takes time. So you need patience. Don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20, right? Make sure that you are knowing that whatever you're working on is going to take some time. Most people are humble and genuinely good people. I think by and large, people are good people. And sure, there's some bad apples in the bunch, but most people are good people and are genuine and are humble. And I found that out by interviewing all these people that you would think should have the biggest ego in the world and are the nicest people and down to earth and every of the 600 interviews. I'm not going to say who it was, but there was only one person who was not a nice person.
Okay.
Out of 600. That's a pretty good ratio.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
So 3 is your network is your net worth. So your network is super valuable, and the more relationships that you have within that network, the better for you and your career and long-term career sustainability, I think is based on your network. 4 is your attitude trumps everything. So we had talked about it before, what your mindset, your attitude, the way that you look at things, the perspective of things. You can wake up every morning and find everything that's wrong in the day, or you can find all of the good that's in the day. So your attitude trumps everything. Nothing is one size fits all. So a lot of times we look at how someone else does their thing and figure that's the way that I have to do it. If I don't do it that way, then it's not going to work for me. But that's not true. And based on these conversations that I've had with all these people had different paths, right? Including myself, of how I came to do what I do. So nothing is one size fits all. I would look at everyone else and pick different parts of what they've done and then put it all together, your own thing.
Yeah.
Number 6, the world is a small place. Everyone knows each other and word travels fast. So there's something, it reminds me of a Warren Buffett saying where he says it takes 20 years to build a relationship in 5 minutes, or 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have this great relationship, or this great reputation, and you do one bad thing, and all of a sudden all your credibility goes out the window. So the world is really small, especially the music industry. And once you get inside of it, you realize how small it is, that if you start interviewing people and everyone's like, yeah, he's a jerk, word travels super fast. Like, look, don't talk to Leonardo because he's a jerk. Right.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah.
Side note, he's not a jerk. He's an amazing human being. But that, and it would happen. And there are podcasts that have started where, they were late or didn't show up or whatever, and word travels fast. So just think about that everyone knows everyone, especially in the industry that you're trying to work in. Number 7, the secret to living is giving. Serving others is paramount. I believe that life is more about what you give than what you take. That's one of the big reasons why I started the podcast too, is, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I've given more than I've taken from the drum community. And I feel like I'm on the right path with that, but keep that in mind throughout your life. Life is not about what can others do for you. It's what you can do for others. And the more you give, the more you will get in return. And there's nothing better than the feeling that you get when you give something or do something for someone who can't pay you back, doesn't intend on paying you back or anything, and you just do it to do it. There's no better feeling than that. So the secret to living is giving. Number 8 is you have time. And I think that a lot of people believe that they don't have time to accomplish these things, whether it be working out or practicing or whatever. It's like, oh, I don't have enough time. You do. Audit your schedule, go through, see how much time you spend watching TV or on Instagram or whatever else that you waste your time with. You have time to do. Everyone has 24 hours, as cliche and cheesy as it sounds. And how you use those 24 hours determine your life. So see where you spend your time. I guarantee you can trim some time away. If you can't practice, if you don't have time to practice, then you need to reevaluate your schedule. Number 9 is that there are no gatekeepers and you don't need permission. So years ago, if you wanted to put out a record, you needed to get approved by someone. If you wanted to start a magazine, then you either had to come up with a lot of money or you had to go to a publisher and they had to approve it for you. Now you can start if you wanted a radio station, you had to get a job, or if you wanted to do a radio show, you had to get a job at a radio station. Now you can just start a podcast. So
Yeah.
you don't need permission there are no gatekeepers anymore. Whatever you want to do, it's total, like the internet has democratized everything, and it's opened it up. It's leveled the playing field, and everyone out there can start their own thing, grow their own thing. You can start your own media company. You can release your own records. You can release your own book. You don't need anyone. It's a great, I think it's amazing. So there are no gatekeepers. And the last one is hard work with consistency is the differentiator. So I think that a lot of people work hard, and I think that they fizzle out after a month or 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or something like that. Consistency is way better than the hard work. So on a scale of 1 to 10 of how hard you're working, if you work at a 10 for 3 months or you work at a 5 for 3 years, I'd take the 5 for 3 years. Yeah. So yeah, of course you have to work hard, but like you have to be consistent. And I think we get into that with practice or with working out or whatever, where people are, New Year's is like the New Year's resolution. It's like, I'm going to go to the gym 7 days a week and all I'm going to eat is kale, or all I'm going to eat is salad and water. And that's it. And like that lasts for 4 days. Right.
Yeah, maybe. Exactly. Maybe.
Or I'm going to practice. You know what? Starting today, I'm going to start practicing 3 hours a day. And I'm going to have this whole complex system of when I'm working out or when I'm practicing and all that. And it doesn't last. So build yourself a system that you think that you can do consistently over time. Like look at Drummer's Resource. Like we've been doing it for 7 years, 600 episodes, never missed an episode. Never.
Yeah.
In 7 years.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying that to gloat. I'm saying that's why we got to where we're at. And it's not just me. I have a team that works for me. So like I would not be able to do any of it without the people I have on my team. But all of us have been consistent, and all of us have been working hard on this podcast for years. And we probably could have worked harder at it for a shorter amount of time, and I don't think we would have had the same success. So those are the 10.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. Talking about practicing, I think there's a link between what you just said about consistency, trying to have a sustainable practice regimen. What do you think are the main ingredients to improve as far as practicing? I'm not talking about what to practice,
sure,
but rather the characteristics of a practice routine, a successful practice routine.
There's 2 points that I would like to make. One, I think the best practice routine is the one that you're actually going to do. Right? Okay. So like if you can do 3 minutes a day for the next 3 years, do it. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like, they always say, like, which workout is the best to do? Mm-hmm. Whatever one you're actually going to do, not the one that you're going to write down on a piece of paper and that's it. So I think that's really important. And I'll take this from Michael Carvin, who is a friend and a mentor of mine. And I think that he said it best, where I said, how long do you think people should practice? And he said 5 minutes. And I was like, 5 minutes? That's it? He said, yeah. He said, well, let me ask you a question. How much do you practice now? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people were like, oh, no, I haven't been practicing that much, but I think I could do an hour a day. It's like, no, you can't. If you could do an hour a day, you'd be doing an hour a day. Right? So start with something small. He also has another analogy, and he calls it touch the handle. Right? Okay. So I talked about this on the podcast, but I think it's important, and I use it in my life still. My wife and I still use it all the time. So he said a friend of his wanted to get in shape. Mm-hmm. And he goes, all right, here's what you should do. He goes, get in your car, drive to the gym, get out of your car, walk up to the door, touch the handle, go back, get in your car, and drive home.
Okay.
And he's like, what? What are you talking? I don't need to go into the gym. He's like, if you want to go into the gym, that's up to you. He's like, just drive there, touch the handle, get back in your car. And he's like, well, if I'm there, I might as well go in. He's like, all right, well, then go in if you want to. But that's all you have to do. And we, as humans, think that we have to have this grandiose plan and like it has to be all charted out and figured out, and I can only, if I can't practice for 3 hours, then there's no point in practicing, and that's wrong. I think that you should, if you're not practicing at all now, try to practice for 5 minutes a day for a month. It's way harder than you think it is.
Yeah.
Way harder than you think it is. And 1 is better than 0. A minute is better than no practicing. 2 minutes is better than 1 minute. 5 minutes is better than 3 minutes. So whatever you think that you can, and you can always build it up. So don't feel like you're not making progress if you're only practicing 5 minutes a day. If you were practicing 0 minutes a day before, that's progress is progress, no matter how slow it is.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. The other thing, I guess this is the third point that I think about practicing. You have to separate playing from practicing. So you have to, if you're going into play just to have fun, that's great. And you just want to sit down and play the drums and all that kind of stuff, that's great. Do not mistake that for practicing, though.
Yeah.
You have to have deliberate practice where you're working on something that is challenging for you, that you have to play at 40 beats a minute because you can't play it, and it's frustrating, and I don't think you have to do that long. I don't think you have to do that for 6 hours. I think you know, if you're going to practice for an hour, I think that 20 minutes of that time has to be something that's really, really hard for you. 30 minutes maybe, you know?
Okay.
So Russ Miller always gave me the advice. He said, go in, play for 15 minutes, whatever you want to play. Do a half hour of like really, really deliberate focus, phone off, like deliberate practice for a half hour. And then for the last 15 minutes, play all the stuff that you like playing. He's like, you're going to go in, you're going to start on a high note because you're going to be having fun. You'll go through all the frustrating stuff, and then when you play again at the end, you leave on a high note, so you're excited to go back in there the next day. There's nothing worse than getting done a really frustrating practice session. The next day, you're like, I don't want to go in there. I sound like shit. Like, it's horrible. And also making sure that when you are practicing, really trying to learn, it has to be deliberate practice. You have to, no distractions, really working on that thing. And guess what? You can do that for 5 minutes a day.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot. It's been so great to have your insights on these great topics. And I hope we can do something together in the near future again.
Anytime. Anytime. I'd love to.
Thanks a lot, man. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Ciao. Grazie mille.